Blessed Lord, brothers and sisters, Brook Yam. This is not a Shabbat lesson, this is an impromptu video. I'm going to title it France Human Zoo, right? I'm going to show you a video preceding this, brothers and sisters, and I'm going to leave the link below so you could watch the full video, right? So this article is coming from The Guardian, right, brothers and sisters, coming from the Guardian. Paris shows unveils life in human zoo. Right? Half naked Africans made to guinea bones and presented as cannibals as they shivered in a mock tribal village in northern France. Native Americans, children displayed at fairgrounds, families from Asia and South Pacific behind railings in European zoos, and dancing Zulus on the London stage. Paris' most talked about exhibition of the winter opened on Tuesday with shock and soul searching over the history of colonial subjects used in human zoo circuses and stage shows, which flourished until as late as 1958. Human zoos, the invention of the savage, curated by former French international footballer turned anti-racist campaigner Lilian Thuram, traces the history of a practice which started when Christopher Columbus displayed 6 Indians at the Spanish royal court in 1492 and went on to become mass entertainment phenomenon in the 19th and early 20th century. Millions of spectators turned out to see savages in zoos, circuses, mock villages, and freak shows from London to St. Louis, Barcelona to Tokyo. These human specimens and living museums served both colonialist propaganda and scientific theories of so-called racial hierarchies. The exhibitions at Paris Quai The exhibition at Paris Quai Branly Jacques Chirac's museum, dedicated to once colonialized cultures, is the first to look at this international phenomenon as a whole. It brings together hundreds of bizarre and shocking artifacts, ranging from posters for male and female Australian cannibals in London, which was the world capital of such stage shows, to documentation for mock villages of Arabs and Senegalese, or juggling tribeswomen in France, which was renowned for its extensive human zoos. Thuram, who was born on the French Caribbean island Guadeloupe, said the exhibition explained the background of racist ideas and fear of the other which persisted today. You have to have the courage to say that each of us has prejudices and these prejudices have a history. Thuram explained he said he was appalled that Hamburg Zoo still had sculptures and of Indians and Africans at its entrance, a sign that humans as well as animals were on display. The exhibition reflects a trend in France to re-examine the exploitation of people for entertainment. The recent film Black Venus by acclaimed director Abdelatif Kechiche told the 19th century story of Saartjie Baartman, a Khoi woman from South Africa who was displayed in London and Paris at the Hottentot Venus. Londoners derided her as a fat bum. In 1906, Congolese pygmy Ota Benga was exhibited in a cage at Monkey House at New York's Bronx Zoo, causing a controversy before he was put in an orphanage for coloreds. He later shot himself. A hairy woman from Laos known as Creole was exhibited at the end of the 19th century as the missing link between man and orangutan, right? William Henry Johnson, an African-American child with a small cranium, was bought from his parent age 4, exhibited in a hairy suit and made to grunt. The show was titled What Is It? You should look that up, brothers and sisters. Do research on that. The exhibition traces the lives of up to 35,000 people put on a show in mock tribal scenes and taken to villages or zoos. In 1931, the great-grandparents of Thuram's World Cup teammate Christiana Karimbiu came to Paris from New Caledonia. They considered themselves ambassadors but were displayed in a cage at the Jardin des Acclamations in Paris. They were later shown in Germany along with about 100 other New Caledonians, Kanaks, and described as cannibals. The phenomenon began to decline in the 1930s with changing public interest at the advent of cinema. The last living spectacles were Congo villagers exhibited in Belgium in 1958, brothers and sisters. You saw what I mean? These people are unrepentant. The scripture talk about the unrepentant nation. These are the unrepentant nation. You understand? And you got to understand, brothers and sisters, they must pay for what they have done. Just like we pay for the sin of our forefathers, they must pay for the sin of their forefathers, because the continuation is never end. You understand? The continuation of their wicked colonial, the deprivation of their mind and soul and body. So judgment must come to these people, brothers and sisters, for the Most High words will not come back to him void. He shall deliver his people, children of Israel, those that are keeping his laws, commands, and statutes. And the remnant that he will save, the 144,000 plus the rest of us that will join with them. We shall go back to our land of our forefathers. Okay? Right, brothers and sisters, we shall go back and build up the walls of Zion, right? And the tabernacle of David the Negus. Right, brothers and sisters? Because the scripture tell you, the scripture says, brothers and sisters, that Judea, that Jerusalem will be barren. As you can see, Jerusalem is occupied right now, right, and trodden down by the Gentiles. You see, so on that note, brothers and sisters, watch this video, like, share, and subscribe. It's free. Blessed love and shalom.
Surrounded by people who made fun of you. Have you ever been humiliated and ridiculed in front of a large group of people because they felt superior to you? Have you ever been surrounded by people who made fun of you? Have you ever been humiliated and ridiculed in front of a large group of people because they felt superior to you? Imagine living that feeling not for one day, not for two, but for years and years. Have you ever been surrounded by people who made fun of you? Have you ever been humiliated and ridiculed in front of a large group of people because they felt superior to you? Imagine living that feeling not for one day, not for two, but for years and years, if not your entire life. Discrimination is nothing to be surprised about. It is something that has been around since time immemorial. Things like racism, classism, and xenophobia become chains and cages instead of attacks and hatred. Unfortunately, not everyone was able to experience this concept only, but there were those who had to experience it in the flesh. And I mean nothing more and nothing less than human zoos. A concept that, beyond the striking, becomes aberrant and deplorable. Before we explore these historical facts, please give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and click the notification bell to stay updated with our latest content. At the end of the 19th century in Europe, what could be considered one of the worst crimes of the colonial era took place, as it is known that racism and abuse of human rights were commonplace on the part of the upper social classes, or white Europeans. But to go to the point of using their power to have people as the center of entertainment is definitely disgusting. And yes, as you just heard, these people who could be called upper class were using others for their entertainment. And I'm not talking about someone giving a monologue or playing an instrument, but people who were treated like animals. This so-called human zoo was a practice that served as entertainment for the people of that time. This activity was mainly performed in France, although it could be seen in other parts of the continent, such as Italy, Belgium, England, Sweden, and Germany. As the name suggests, it was an exhibition of people from different native tribes, and in some cases, people with some kind of deformity, similar to what happened in circuses. People of different races and ethnicities, such as Asians, Africans, and even South Americans, were treated as wild and primitive beings. They were locked in cages and bars, fed raw meat, and their habitats were usually kept in precarious hygienic conditions, just to make them look more realistic in their areas of origin, which were also recreated, turning each place into a perfect representation of the stereotype. And if you think this is all, those who visited these places treated the prisoners as toys. They were not only allowed to look at them, but also to touch them, pet them, take pictures with them, and walk around their habitats. During these exhibitions, the captives often died, and instead of burying their bodies in local cemeteries, they were buried in cemeteries next to rapists and pedophiles. What is most shady about this is that it is not only colonial times, but also very recent cases. The last known human zoo to be closed was the Jardin d'Acclimatation in Paris, France in 1931. Although this story becomes even more shameful when you know its origins, chronological origins. Mexico has some influence on it because during the Mesoamerican post-classical period, from the year 900 to the year 1521, the Emperor Moctezuma Xocoyotzin, also called Moctezuma II, was the Huey Tlatoani, ruler of the Triple Alliance, of the Mexican city of Tenochtitlan. Moctezuma was a lover of animals and wildlife, so over time he began to have a collection of them, thus creating a zoo. The zoo housed a wide variety of animals such as pumas, jaguars, lynxes, bears, bison, golden eagles, hawks, parakeets, macaws, quetzals, pheasants, rattlesnakes, rays, sawfish, Japanese turtles, crocodiles, and parrotfish. Undoubtedly the most remarkable were the humans. It is said that the people who lived in the zoo were brought there to keep them away from the ridicule of society, as these people were considered freaks. Do you know what I'm talking about, do you not? They were hunchbacks, people without arms or legs, the kind of people who were called people forsaken by God in those days. Then, in this chronology, the first promoter of this type of show was Carl Hagenbeck, one of the fathers of modern zoos, who in 1874 introduced Samoans and Lapps into his circus exhibits, presenting them as purely natural populations, along with their tents, harpoons, and sleds. This German circus tamer made little distinction between bringing in wild animals like tigers or kidnapping exotic people like Eskimos. At that time, persecuted people from all over the world, mainly from colonized countries, were brought to the big European cities. Persuaded, these people signed unjust contracts that would make them live in cages in terrible living conditions. These attractions existed to entertain the white European public and exhibited black Africans, Australian Aborigines, and Eskimos. Human zoos were a Sunday entertainment option for a public thirsty for exoticism. Countries like Spain, France, Italy, England, Germany, and Belgium exhibited these people because they were considered savages and inferior beings. Visitors threw food at them, commented on their physiognomy, and compared blacks to primates. The cage of people brought from African countries was the most successful. Years later, the Brussels International Exposition of 1897 was held, motivated by King Leopold II of Belgium. He decided to move the colonial section of the exposition to the Palace of the Colonies in Tervuren. The halls housed stuffed animals, Congolese ethnographic and artistic objects, and geological exhibits. A sort of African village was set up in the exhibition gardens, where some 267 Congolese who had been forcibly expelled by the Belgians from the then Congo Free State were exhibited as an exotic attraction. It is worth mentioning that several of these Congolese died. Some fought to avoid being expelled from their land, and others died of diseases caused by the deplorable living conditions to which they were subjected. The exhibition was a success and inspired other places in France to follow suit. These exhibitions were often accompanied by lectures and demonstrations that reinforced the idea of the superiority of European civilization. In short, they were events designed to demonstrate superiority and justify European actions that were nothing but barbaric. The popularity of human zoos in France was linked to the country's colonial ambitions, which sought to establish its dominance over its colonies in Africa and Asia. One of the most prominent episodes was the Exposition Universelle in Paris in 1889, which featured groups of people from French colonies, such as Algerians, Tunisians, and Kanaks from New Caledonia. At the same exposition, the so-called Villages Nègres were organized, where villages were reconstructed and Africans of different ethnic groups were presented, pretending to show how they lived in their places of origin. Human Zoo arrives in different countries. The creation of these exhibits was only the seed from which many branches of this concept would grow. We can call this the expansion of the human zoos in Europe. The great success of these zoos was due to several factors. First, the growing public curiosity about the outside world and the exoticization of non-European cultures contributed to the demand for such spectacles. People were fascinated by what they perceived as the unknown and the other. The organizers of these events often presented them in a sensationalist manner. The popularization of human zoos in Europe had a ripple effect in other parts of the world, spreading the practice to different regions. Let's put this in a little more context. In the United States, they also became popular in the 19th century, although they did not reach the same scale as in Europe. Similar exhibits were held at fairs and expositions, featuring American Indians and Africans. On the other hand, Germany was another European country where human zoos were common at fairs and exhibitions. The scientist Karl Hagenbeck, known for his exotic animal exhibits at Hagenbeck's Tierpark, also organized show villages with people of different ethnic backgrounds. The influence of human zoos reached the colonies of the European powers in Asia and Africa. In some colonies, local exhibits of indigenous people were organized, often exploiting the indigenous population for the entertainment of the colonists. Imagine that it was not enough to take the natives by force, but also to go to their places to humiliate them. Fighting for human rights and equality.